Hello. We're continuing the read of the book 11th Hour Preparedness. I'm the author, Tyler Woods. I wrote this book. It's available on Amazon. The current edition is 7 years old. It is very due an upgrade, but the information is still as accurate as ever. And we will begin. I'm up to page 89 in this part, and we're discussing food and water. This is a rather large section. We'll cover it in about 3 sessions, I believe. But we begin. Food and water. Start a notebook to keep track of your resources, ideas, and an outline to follow. I follow a simple outline that follows what I call the 4 F's. They are food, fuel, first aid, and firearms. There are other things to consider, but these are the most important areas during my understanding of preparedness during difficult times. Food and water. Food and water are absolutely first on any list. The human body can survive 30 days without food, but not much more than 3 days without water. Food and water will become a new currency. The earthquake in Haiti highlighted this. Before the earthquake, people were poor and needy and would sell anything if you had money. Because Haiti is such a poor country, little money was required to appear rich by comparison. After the quake, perspective changed. A basket of money wouldn't buy much, but a bottle of water would. The currency of the day had become food and water. Be discreet about your food storage. When food shortages become evident, federal precedent already exists to allow confiscation of private stores for the good of the country. Hoarding is being cast as an illness that needs intervention, and those who prepare will be blamed as cause of shortages in attempt to divert attention from federal bureaucracy that created it. I might intercede here. During our current situation and all of the toilet paper shortage, it was immediately blamed on hoarders for the toilet paper shortage. And those who were preppers and had supplies of toilet paper that had been acquired during times of plenty, they were being blamed and vilified as causing this great shortage. It was immediate, and it was really sad to see how quickly the media jumped on accusing hoarders or accusing those who prepared early as being the cause of the problem, when it clearly was not. Here's an article titled Guerrilla Hoarding by Wendy McElroy, Mrs. Daily, Tuesday, April 12th, 2011. The headlines scream, "Is this baby in danger due to hoarding grandma?" The horrors of hoarding and animal hoarding often tied to mental illness. Meanwhile, a popular TV series entitled Hoarders focuses upon people whose inability to part with their belongings is so out of control that they are on the verge of a personal crisis. Like drug addicts, they require an intervention. The vilification of hoarders is mentally ill, child-endangering animal abusers is in full swing. What is this vile and dangerous thing called hoarding? The noun hoard is defined as a store of money or valued objects, typically one that is secret or carefully guarded. The verb means to save up as for future use. In common usage, anyone who stores more of a good than their neighbors do is viewed as a hoarder. A common example of hoarding is stocking up on durable grocery items, such as canned goods, rice, or pasta, when they are on sale, so that your family has a year's supply of staples in the house. In rural orders, this is known as keeping a good pantry. Historically, governments have frowned upon hoarding, especially in bad economic times. Stigmatizing the hoarder for causing high prices or shortages because he buys more than his share serves a useful political purpose. They divert attention away from government policies such as tariffs that are the true cause of empty shelves and high prices. By stirring up resentment toward neighbors who own one more can of peas than you do, politicians avoid the full and just brunt of public anger. In times of economic crisis, when governments flirt with rationing and price controls, the frown can turn into a scowl. Laws against hoarding are often then passed, and goods are sometimes confiscated. The most notorious confiscation in America came in 1933 when President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102. Ostensibly, as a measure to combat the Great Depression, the order commanded the American people, with few exceptions, to relinquish all but a still permitted $100 worth of gold coins, bullion, and certificates to the Federal Reserve in exchange for a payment of $20.67 per troy ounce. Less than a year later, that government raised the trade rate to $35 per troy ounce. Thus, the government reaped huge profits at the expense of private investors and savers, aka hoarders of gold. Hoarding, like any other human activity, can become obsessive. But in its common form, hoarding is nothing more than preparing for the future by laying aside a store of items you and your family may need. This is an especially valuable practice during economic instability when necessary supplies can become scarce or suddenly double in price. The Austrian investment counselor Jack Pugsley once explained another perspective on hoarding. It is an investment. A low-income family may not be able to afford precious metals, but they can afford to invest in dry or canned consumables. Last year, with some frequency, my grocery store sold a 900-gram package of pasta for 99 cents. With wheat shortages, and with the American government diverting almost 30% of corn crops into producing alcohol, food products dependent on grain have skyrocketed. The same package of pasta now regularly costs $2.99. If a struggling family bought 60 packages of the 99-cent pasta for future consumption of one package per week, then their hoarding would have knocked perhaps $100 off their grocery bill. By consistently buying more than they immediately need of bargain items, the family can build a solid pantry to sustain them through unemployment, inflation, or scarcity. Unfortunately, during economic times, the government also acquires an interest in hoarding, especially in punishing the hoarder as unpatriotic. An example is the Food and Fuel Control Act, which became law in 1917. During World War I, the act's official name was an act to provide further for the national security and defense by encouraging the production, conserving the supply, and controlling the distribution of food products and fuel. That was a long title for a bill. In short, the government became a food dictator, and anyone possessing more than a 30-day supply of food, which was considered reasonable by Food Administrator Herbert Hoover, could be arrested. The May 30th, 1918 New York Times carried the headline, "Navy Man Indicted for Food Hoarding." It reported on a man who had invested his wife's inheritance in a year's food for storage, and so they were held on a $3,000 bail each. The food was confiscated. The Navy man's fate is a cautionary tale in more than one way. The store of food for his family was discovered because a grocer and neighbors informed upon him. Thus, a sad corollary to the wisdom of hoarding food for your family is the need to do so with discretion. This is sad because the natural impulse of people in a community is to assist those in need. Measures like Food and Fuel Control Act, measures like the Food and Fuel Control Act mean that sharing food with a neighbor who has hungry children is no longer simply a gesture of compassion and generosity. Such government acts make sharing into a danger to your safety and your own children's well being. There is still time to hoard the items upon which your family depends. Prices are rising, to be sure, but the full force of inflation and shortages is probably several months in the future. Hoard now, hoard quietly, and that ends the article. Storing food. Take inventory of your home readiness as it stands right now. How long can you live without a trip to the grocery store? Is your family prepared? Might interject, how prepared were you for the toilet paper shortage? Households average about 10 days food supply, and many homes have far less. Actually, the results are that urban areas inside city limits, generally families have a 4-day food supply. Suburban areas outside the cities, but still close enough to the city, have approximately a 10-day food supply. Rural areas, homes have approximately a 30-day food supply. And deep rural areas, way out, I'm talking, an hour's drive to a nearby, to a full service grocery store, have somewhere around a 3-month food supply. And that's just the way they live out there. Below is a link with some FEMA recommendations for home food storage. It's odd to note that the same federal agency that would confiscate private stores of food offers recommendation for what foods to store. I'm not sure if this is still a current link or not, but it's http://www.aoods.com. It's AAOOBF or bfoods.com. And then /amounts to store, all one word, .htm. I recommend storing at least 3 months supply of canned or dehydrated ready-to-eat food that requires little or no cooking. These foods are readily available in your grocery store. Don't be sold on the idea that you need expensive survival food from some mail order supplier. Food from your grocery store will also require less change to your diet and help with adjustment to changes in lifestyle. There is a purpose for freeze-dried food or powdered food, but keeping a well-stocked pantry of common canned food items will not only cost you less money, it will reduce the need to make as many nuisance trips to the grocery store. Ready-to-eat foods that require no preparation include beef stew, soup, canned vegetables, canned pork and beans, Spam, whole-cooked chicken, and canned fruit. None of these require cooking and can be eaten at room temperature. Cooking a pot of beans may seem like a good idea, but the result of the cooking aroma from large numbers of hungry people may result in acts of desperation that are never welcome. The first 3 months after a fall of infrastructure are the most difficult and is a time to maintain as low of a profile as possible. A good set of rules are no lights, no travel, and no smoke or cooking odors. Seek to be invisible in your environment. You are manning a lifeboat with your family inside. If you try to rescue more victims than you have resources to feed, the victims will still die, but your family will perish with them. Curiosity will betray you to surrounding populations. Anyone with food will look and act differently than those without resources. It would be impossible to blend in. Stay home, stay hidden, and stay alive. This current quarantine period, people are going crazy, and it's only been a few weeks. Staying home with no outside activity is becoming a huge challenge, and it's only a couple of weeks. Could you imagine if you needed to do that for 3 months? but that is the demographics. We'll be getting into the expected, not the expected, the multiplied experience of people in terrible disasters and what happens. It is a progressive act that is duplicated no matter what the cause of the loss of infrastructure and loss of when people are pretty much left on their own, what happens. And it doesn't matter whether it's an earthquake, a war, you name it, they all cause the same thing and almost on the exact same timeline. After you have your 3-month supply of ready-to-eat foods, begin a more normal supply of stable food that will take you to 6 months. That's only an additional 3-month supply of your existing stores. From that point, expand your normal food storage to a year and then keep going until you've reached a 3-year supply. This sounds like a lot of food, but growing food takes time, and the transition to full-time subsistence farming will take a few years. If trouble comes in the spring and you miss that growing season to remain invisible, it will be another full year before you can plant a garden and another few months before food can be harvested. There is no such thing as too much food. Farming isn't for everyone, and a community is more than farmers. Teachers, dentists, doctors, blacksmiths, and tailors are all necessary, along with farmers, hunters, and fishermen. Any rebuilt community will take time to form, and a 3-year food store is not excessive. A new understanding of food will emerge. Since caloric intake will need to nearly double due to the physical nature of life without machinery, the kinds of food we will eat will also change. High-calorie foods will be preferred to low-fat or low-calorie items. Potatoes, corn, carrots, and peas will replace celery, lettuce, and radishes. Breads will be heavier and perhaps made of whole wheat, corn, or other grains. Since bread making will return to the home kitchen, the source of yeast may also change. Today we purchase packs of yeast from the grocery store. Tomorrow may require knowledge of how to culture leavening in the form of sourdough or wild yeast. Baking powder might be replaced by buttermilk and soda. Food preparation may demand acquired skills that might be more easily learned before the internet and social groups become a thing of the past. Having a supply of wheat and grains does not assure the knowledge of how to convert that into bread for a family. As everyone knows, there's a lot more to cooking than buying the ingredients. Fats and oils are a vital but often neglected part of preparedness. Our storage of food is typically heavy in grains, rice, and beans, while painfully light in meats and oils. The simple answer for this is that grains, rice, and beans are easy to store, while meats, fats, and oils take some creativity to store. We've been told that animal fat intake is the cause of obesity and related disorders, but the rise of these health problems occurred as our diet turned away from natural animal-based fats and began substituting partially hydrogenated fats and vegetable oils. How sick is that? Or how slick is that? Consumer marketing introduced partially hydrogenated fats and vegetable oils into our diet and then blamed what was healthy as the cause for the increase in health problems. An additional problem with vegetable oils is that they are not stable and have a short shelf life. We need animal-based fats to assimilate vitamins A, D, E, and K. Sources of oils that are friendly to the shelf are coconut oil and coconut milk. Canned coconut milk is rich in fatty acids and when mixed to 50% with water, provides a substitute for regular milk. Coconut oil keeps well on the shelf, fries foods well, and has many medical uses that include superb wound dressing, antifungal, and antibacterial properties. Canned coconut milk has a typical shelf life of 3 years or more. Coconut oil is very stable and can be stored for as long as 5 years. Ghee, Ghee, ghee is basically clarified butter that has been processed longer to further purify the fatty oils from moisture and solids. You can make it at home from unsalted butter, as it has a high smoke point, which makes it good for cooking. The clarifying process removes the lactose content from the butter and makes ghee a suitable answer for the lactose intolerant. To make ghee, start with a couple pounds of unsalted butter, preheat an oven to 250 degrees, and cook the butter in a glass or stainless steel pan for 2 hours. Carefully separate the clear butter oil from the solids at the bottom of the pan. Filter the oil through cheesecloth to further remove stray solids. Ghee may be canned for long-term storage and has a shelf life of at least 2 years without refrigeration. Some are still using ghee that is 6 to 8 years old with no sign of spoiling. Ghee will turn solid when cool, but melts back to liquid with no ill effects. Lard and tallow. Lard is rendered pig fat, while tallow is rendered beef fat. Both have been used in cooking for centuries. Rendering is done by cutting the fat into small pieces and melting them in a pot or slow cooker until the oils separate and can be collected. Some have canned lard and claim that it will store for many years. Animal fat may also be used as a storage medium for cooked meat. Pioneers and sailors fried meat for storage and sealed it in a container by pouring enough hot lard or tallow to bury the meat. It would keep for at least 6 months without refrigeration. Health-minded consumers have come full circle regarding lard and its new choice for cooking. Not only does it make pastry flakier, it finds its way to the top pick in blind taste tests. Beware of grocery store lard. It is part hydrogenated to extend shelf life. Rendering your own lard is easy, and directions are in the back of this book. Finding wild food. Never assume that because birds and animals eat something that it's safe for humans. Their digestive system allows them to eat things that would certainly kill a normal person. There is a process to cautiously discover if a food source is safe, but it takes time and isn't something that should be attempted quickly. Never shortcut the procedure and follow each step in progression. Let only one person conduct the tasting or the testing. If there is uncertainty of the results in any step, stop. First step is to look. Attempt to identify the plant. Don't eat plants that are slimy, wilted, or bug infested. Smell. Crush some of the prospective food and smell it for an odor similar to bitter almonds or peaches. If it smells anything like either of those two odors, discard the plant and do not eat it, as it may contain hydrocyanic acid, which is a very deadly plant toxin. Remember, hydrocyanic acid smells like peach pits or almonds, and that's the best description of that smell. Avoid that smell. Don't eat anything that smells like that. Skin tests. Rub some of the crushed plant on tender skin, such as inside of the biceps, someplace like that. If there is any rash or irritation, wash it off and discard the plant. LMT test, lips, mouth, tongue. Put a crushed portion of the plant on the lip, then in the corner of the mouth, and finally on the tip of the tongue. Test these in sequence for 20 seconds each, and if any location exhibits irritation, stop the test and discard the plant. Finally, eat some. If the plant passes all these tests, chew a small piece of the plant and swallow it. Do not eat or drink anything else for 5 hours. If there are no symptoms of sore throat, burning, nausea, belching, or abdominal pain, the plant may be considered safe to eat. I might comment once again, Each of these steps need to be done sequentially, and if any of the steps fail, do not proceed. Some additional cautions when evaluating plants for food are: reject unknown plants with sticky, milky sap. Reject unknown red plants. Reject plants with wilted or old leaves. Even blackberry that is good to eat becomes toxic when the leaves begin to wilt. Reject any seed or grain that is bitter or burns your mouth. Eat only fresh young plants. Food storage. Food storage is easier than most would think. With a little effort, one can accumulate and maintain provisions with food supplies purchased at a local grocery store. Making very large purchases of storable food at a neighborhood grocery store may attract attention to your storage plan. A way to avoid this is to make purchases of normal quantities at different stores. Warehouse grocery stores such as Costco, Sam's Club, and restaurant supply stores are accustomed to large food purchases, and no one will think twice about large acquisitions. Large quantities of food can also be purchased unnoticed at the local grocery store by simply shortening the time between shopping trips and purchasing a bit more than normal. It's not wise to advertise that you're storing food supplies. When the need arises, you don't want to be known as a resource. Canned foods have a freshness date printed on the can, and most claim freshness for a couple of years. That date is a recommendation for freshness and a full nutritional value. The Department of Agriculture tested canned foods that were over 100 years old and found them to be remarkably free of harmful bacteria, with much of their nutritional value retained. I would not hesitate to eat canned goods that were several years old as long as the cans were in good physical condition and had maintained their vacuum seal. They may lose flavor and some nutrition, but they will remain a food source long beyond the freshness date. Avoid cans when the lid is domed or bulging. This indicates growth of harmful bacteria. Recently, we made a trip to the East Coast to reconcile the house and belongings of a relative whose health prevented them from living at home. It took us 4 days to get things ready for an estate sale, and we ate from a well-stocked pantry and freezer. Much of the food was way past the expiration date, but we found nothing spoiled. Even frozen meat surprised us. Hams and cured meats fared well even after a year or two past their freshness dates. Meats in grocery store wrappers were spoiled or freezer burned even before their expiration date, but meats frozen in airtight wrapping did well. Some products do not store well. Powdered, canned, and condensed milk are some of them. Milk is our primary source of calcium and vitamins A and D. Besides being a key ingredient to many recipes, regular powdered milk has a limited shelf life unless it is stored in an oxygen-free environment. But there is good news. I've located a supplier of a milk alternative made from whey, a milk byproduct from making cheese, that has all the calcium and vitamins A and D of regular milk and passes the taste test of many who don't like fat-free powdered milk. It's good for cooking and stores 5 years or more. The cost is about $2 per gallon. Their web link is, and it's just the name of the company is honeyvillegrain.com. And on their site, you can find all kinds of dehydrated. They're one of the main suppliers of dehydrated food, but this milk is Honeyville, just like honey, and then VILLE grain, honeyvillegrain.com. And it's in their section for dried milk and eggs. And I don't profit from promoting this product. It's what I have purchased for my own family, and I pass this on to you after a lot of personal investigation and price shopping. Now, things change, so keep checking your prices and check many sources. Flour and grain products present a problem. Whole grain is designed for long-term storage, but ground flour does not store well. I'm told grain recovered from 2,000 years of storage in an Egyptian pyramid had greater than 50% germination rate. That means it retained its integrity and would also have remained a good food source. Flour, on the other hand, does not keep. As soon as the kernel and germ are crushed together, their spoilage clock starts ticking. Processed wheat flour loses nearly 80% of its nutritional value after only 72 hours and becomes rancid after about 3 months, depending on temperature. Whole grain products should be stored in an oxygen-free environment. Food grade buckets are the containers that many restaurant and bakery food products are delivered in. They generally come with a lid that forms an airtight seal and are made of high-density polyethylene, HDPE. As long as they did not hold food with strong odors, such as pickles, they are reusable and convenient for storage of home food supplies. Food-grade buckets made of high-density polyethylene have a mold mark similar to the one shown below. And I'll show this up to the camera. You can freeze it if you need to see it. See that HDPE and a 2 in the middle of that triangle? HDPE, high-density polyethylene, is used in milk, juice, and water containers in order to take advantage of its excellent protective barrier properties. Its chemical resistance properties also make it well suited for items such as containers for household chemicals and detergent. Most 5-gallon food buckets are made from HDPE. Should it become necessary to move to a safer location, 5-gallon buckets are the right size to quickly load into a bug-out vehicle. Food-grade 5-gallon buckets store nearly 50 pounds of wheat and have reclosable airtight seals. To make a container oxygen-free, oxygen-absorbing packets are available through online stores, or dry ice may be used. To use dry ice, lay a hamburger-sized piece of dry ice wrapped in a paper towel on top of whatever you are sealing in the bucket. Set the lid loosely on top of the bucket. Let the dry ice completely melt to avoid pressurizing your container. After the dry ice melts, it turns from a solid directly to a gas. The released carbon dioxide will have displaced the oxygen, and the lid can be pressed onto the bucket. Mylar bucket liners are available from online supply stores and offer an added level of protection. Mylar liners can be heat sealed with a household iron. See the back of the book. Another useful item for food storage is a vacuum sealer. These draw out air via vacuum and provide an airtight seal at the same time. Vacuum sealing is a great tool for backpacking multiple types of food in the same bucket, for packaging multiple food types into the same bucket, but some of my vacuum sealed items have lost their seal over time. I don't rely on vacuum sealing as a standalone process. Food grade buckets and lids are now being stocked at many stores, such as Lowe's and Home Depot. Grain mill. Long-term storage of grains must be in whole form and not pre-ground into flour. Therefore, a good grain mill is an essential tool of home preparedness. A grain mill will turn wheat into fine flour, corn into coarse cornmeal, or a mixture of grains into a very coarse grind that will cook into a great hot cereal. Some require an additional auger to grind corn and beans, but it's worth the price. There are many uses for flour made from corn and beans. When choosing a grain mill, consider the need for manual operation and the practicality of using an electric motor during times when electricity is available. As with most things, you get what you pay for, and a grain mill will be used to produce everything from flour for baking to cracked corn for chickens. It is expected to be capable of large quantity operation. I would steer away from cheaply made products that do better at filling my shelf than filling my needs. Quality grain mill should last a lifetime with regular use and is worth the investment. One of the best mills is the Country Living grain mill. And again, I don't profit by promoting these products. Dealers sign a minimum advertised price agreement that prevents the price from going below their set mark. Cheaper mills are available, but you get what you pay for. Meat. Meat is a primary source of protein and poses a slight storage problem. Have you ever wondered how Grandma kept meat when they didn't have electricity on the farm? The answer was canning or drying, called jerky. Almost any lean meat can be dried or canned. Canned food was a new concept in the early 19th century, and Sir William Edward Parry brought canned provisions with him on 2 Arctic expeditions to the Northwest Passage in the early 1820s. One of those expeditions, their ship became icebound. The party had to abandon their plans and walk to civilization. The ship was later found, and a 4-pound can of roast veal was recovered along with artifacts of the fateful expedition. These were displayed in a museum until 1938, when the canned food was opened and analyzed. The over 100-year-old content was found to have retained most of its nutritional value and appeared to be in perfect condition. It was reportedly fed to a cat that seemed to enjoy it immensely with no following side effects. What cowards. Properly processed meat will last years without refrigeration. Just short of a pound of lean ground beef will fit in a wide-mouthed pint jar. And when it is removed, it resembles a small meatloaf. A potato masher will break it into crumbles, ready for spaghetti or a favorite casserole. Stew meat is another good canned item and keeps its original juices for a quick soup or stew when added to a pot of dehydrated or canned vegetables. I've read the advantages of raw packed meat versus seared or braised and canned meat and have decided in favor of raw packed. The terms are misleading because either method results in a fully cooked product in a jar. Raw packed refers to the method of placing the food into the jars in raw form and then processing with a pressure canner for 90 minutes. After 90 minutes of pressure canning, no one has the option of ordering their steak rare, and E. coli isn't going to happen as long as the seal remains intact on the jar. Editor's note, thanks to Pat. Please take care when canning meat and vegetables. Follow the directions of a reliable source exactly. Ball home canning products are the gold standard in home preserving supplies, and their recipes are tried and true. Ball's Blue Book was a well-used book in our grandmother's kitchens, and it and more Ball recipe books are still available. A clean kitchen and supplies are a must, and your jars and lids must remain sterile. Chicken cans well. We have purchased a whole chicken in a can at our grocery store. It is very handy for making chicken soup in a hurry. Tuna, any fish for that matter, will last for better than 5 years when canned. When we lived in the Pacific Northwest, we bought fresh tuna from commercial fishing boats at the docks. I found 1/4 pint canning jars that looked like tuna cans made of glass. We canned our tuna, and it turned out so well we have never enjoyed commercial canned tuna since. I've also wondered how commercial brands can sell so much water in their cans of tuna. After squeezing out the water, there's not much tuna left. A quote, the Department of Agriculture tested canned goods that were over 100 years old and found them to be remarkably free of harmful bacteria with much of their nutritional value retained. That's where we're going to stop here today. We're up to page 108, and we will continue later. Thanks for following.